This is Comfrey, which is a somewhat invasive plant. It has the benefit of that its roots go a long way down. They pull up useful chemicals from the ground, so it can be used as a fertilizer. It's also a good source of nectar, particularly for bumblebees. The bumblebees can't get in, but when the flowers get a bit bigger, what they do is bite a hole in here and get the nectar and pollen that way. So it's a very useful plant to have in the garden, although it can be a bit invasive. But we use it to make fertilizer, and also as because it provides nectar and pollen for the bumblebees and for honeybees. The way I tend to harvest it is just use a knife like this and go down and cut the leaves off. They're lovely big leaves, and you can easily cut them off, and doing it that way you don't damage the root at all. If it's in the garden, obviously in many cases you have to dig it up if it just gets invasive, but the leaves themselves are very useful to have for the fertilizer. For the cages just to dry a little bit and to make them a bit easier to handle. So it's a very abundant resource. We're just having left to dry for a day, so just collect with the barrow really. There's just tons and tons of it. We'll collect all that and then put it into the drum to make a fertilizer. This is how we make the Comfrey fertilizer. Just a drum here which we fill full of Comfrey leaves. It's actually getting rather full at the moment, but it will drop down to a much lower volume, and then later we'll add water to make the Comfrey fertilizer. Bottom, which is how we run off the Comfrey. It's a bit slow because obviously there's all sorts of stuff in there and it probably needs a bit more water adding to it, but that makes a brew, and normally it's a very strong brew at the moment. You can't smell that obviously, but it's a very rich aroma, not sort of thing you'd want as a perfume. So that would normally be added about that sort of volume to a 2-gallon watering can. So it's a dilution, well, that sort of range. It's easy just in thinking jam jars and a standard watering can. So half a jam jar to a standard watering can. And then that's watered onto things. It contains a lot of potassium drawn up from deep in the ground, and so that's particularly beneficial to fruit crops like tomatoes and similar. But with these things, if you're using a jam jar like I do, is always to store the jam jar upside down, so that if it gets filled with rainwater, well, it can't get filled with rainwater. If it gets filled with rainwater, there's usually enough pressure with the frost to break them. So that's normally left under here upside down, just to make sure it doesn't get filled with water and then broken by the frost.